Hello guys and welcome to another challenge video. If you've seen my previous videos, you'll know that I've done a gift Pokemon challenge on Fire Red. Well, this time I decided to turn things up a notch. Today we find out, can you beat Pokemon Fire Red Omega using only gift Pokemon? For those of you who don't know, Fire Red Omega is a ROM hack of Fire Red made by Drayano, who in my opinion makes some of the best ROM hacks out there. This game is much more difficult than the vanilla Fire Red experience, and all Pokemon from generations 1 through 3 are available. Because of this, there is a lot more gift Pokemon to choose from, around 20 in fact, so I'm really spoilt for choice. Let's just quickfire through some rules. I can only use gift Pokemon in battle. No other Pokemon may be used for any other reason, not even for HMs. No items in battle either. Let's make this already challenging ROM hack even more difficult. Alright, with the rules out the way, let's do this. I start the game and pick the female character this time, naming her Saki. A little bit difficult this time, but comment down below if you get the reference. As is tradition at this point, I name our rival Zwigo and the challenge begins. The 3 starters available in this game are different to normal. You have the choice of Magby, Smoochum or Elekid. I quite like the idea of having an ice type in the early game, so I pick Smoochum. Zwigo picks Magby and challenges us to a battle which we promptly lose. I don't want to talk about it. We get Professor Oak's parcel and deliver it back to him, and he gives us the Pokédex. With that I head up to Route 2 and get our first new team member, Trico. Trico is my favourite Gen 3 starter, and it did really well in my Emerald gift Pokemon video, so I just know it'll be able to do the same here. We face off against Zwigo, and this time we don't lose. His first Pokemon Zubat gets absolutely annihilated by a confusion from Smoochum, and even Magby isn't a problem, as we get a lucky confusion, meaning that after a couple of hits he actually knocks himself out. With that victory under our belt, we travel through Viridian Forest and collect our next gift Pokemon, Torchic. I really did consider using this on the team, but ultimately decided against it. We arrive in Pewter City, where we can already get our next gift Pokemon, Mudkip. As with Torchic, I won't be using Mudkip on the team. Sorry Zwigo. I decide to try and beat Brock, who like all major fights in this game has 6 Pokemon. He starts off with Geodude, so I lead with Trico. I outspeed, and despite being 4 times super effective, Absorb isn't enough to KO. We get hit and slowed down by a Rock Tomb, but we're able to knock it out despite him healing with the Super Potion. We even managed to heal back all of our health in the process. Next up is a Rhyhorn, so I stay in. I hit another Absorb for over half as we're hit with a Rock Tomb which lowers our speed even more. Because of this, he now hits first and goes for Flamethrower, which we somehow manage to survive and finish it off with one more Absorb. Next up is Vulpix, so I decide to switch in Smoochum. Confusion does a good amount of damage as he decides to set up a substitute. Another Confusion breaks it though as he attempts to put us to sleep, but we stay awake thanks to our ability Insomnia. One more Confusion finishes it off, and next out is Onyx, so I swap back into Trico. Absorb does over half as he misses the Rock Tomb. He does heal up with a Citrus Berry though and uses Swagger, confusing us. We don't actually ever end up hitting ourselves though, so a couple more Absorbs take it out no problem. His next Pokemon is Lord Helix himself, but falls easily to just 2 Absorbs, and his final Pokemon Kabuto faints to just 1, thanks to a critical hit. We beat Brock, and Trico grows to level 16, which triggers its evolution into Grovyle. Easily one of the best characters in the Mystery Dungeon franchise, by the way. On the way through Mount Moon, I picked the Helix fossil, but you already knew that. Anyway, something about a YouTube algorithm means you should probably ask anyway? I don't know. We arrive in Celadon City, and I decide to try my luck with Misty straight away. But this was a huge mistake. Her Starmie in particular is so difficult to deal with that we just have no chance whatsoever. I decide to do some grinding, and at level 24, Smoochum actually evolves into Jinx. That's a lot earlier than normal. With our new Jinx, I decide to try and take on Zwigo instead, and this fight was actually a lot easier than Misty. First up is Golbat, and I go for Ice Punch, which is easily enough to one-hit KO. Ghastly is out next, but he also falls to just 1 Confusion. Next up is Snubble, who easily goes down to 1 Ice Punch. This has pretty much been a clean sweep so far. His last Pokemon is his starter Magby, so I decide to go for Confusion. It does a decent amount of damage and his karate chop really doesn't do that much. We're able to get it down to red health before he heals up though, and we end up fainting to a fire punch before we can finish it off. Thankfully though, Groval's faster, so one pursuit is all it takes to get the victory. We clear Nugget Bridge and get our next gift Pokemon, Cyndaquil. It was a close one between Torchic and Cyndaquil, but in this case I chose Cyndaquil. We also only have to grow it one level before it evolves into Quilava. We pay a visit to Bill, who gives us the SS ticket, and before fighting Misty again, I decide it's time to get another team member. We talk to this NPC here, who gives us a Totodile. Totodile is my all-time favourite starter Pokemon, so I'm really happy to have this on the team. It was an absolute no-brainer. I grow it up a few levels until it evolves into Croconaw and face off against Misty once again. Her first Pokemon is Staryu, so I start with Grovyle and I'm able to take it out with just a couple of Bullet Seeds. Next up is Psyduck, so I swap into Jinx and take it out in just a couple of Confusions. Seadra's out next, and despite us getting hit by a critical hit Water Pulse, we're able to take it out in a couple of Confusions as well. Next up is Luvdisc, but it's really nothing more than a minor inconvenience as a few Confusions take it out as well. That terrifying Starmie's up next, so I swap back into Grovyle. We get paralysed and we're able to deal some good damage with Bullet Seed before he heals up with a Lemonade and finishes off with a Water Pulse. I switch in Croconaw, but we immediately get one hit KO by a single Shockwave. I swap in Jinx and go for a Lovely Kiss, which puts it to sleep. I go for an Ice Punch, but he actually withdraws Starmie and goes into Togetic, who gets immediately one hit KO by an Ice Punch. Not her smartest play there. Starmie comes back out and we're able to put it to sleep again and finally knock it out with a few Ice Punches before it can wake up, finally winning us the second badge. I teach the team a few TMs and move on towards Vermilion City. On the way we get a Chikorita, which I'll be using for HMs. We reach Vermilion City and we face off against Wiggo on the SSN once again. His team really hasn't changed too much though, so we beat him without any problems. We get the HM for cut and face off against Lieutenant Surge, but this ended up being a real pain. His Magneton in particular completely destroys the team, so I train a few more levels and try again. After a bit of grinding, things go much better. His first Pokemon is Flaffy, who goes down to a critical hit Leaf Blade right off the bat. Manectric is out next, so I go for another Leaf Blade, which does about half, but we do get hit with Static. He outspeeds us now and goes for a super effective Flamethrower, but we're able to survive the hit and finish it off with one more Leaf Blade. Next up is Jolteon, so I decide to swap into Jinx. I go for Ice Punch as we actually outspeed and it does about half. He sets up an Agility though and then hits us with a Shockwave, which doesn't do that much, so one more Ice Punch knocks it out no problem. Next out is Chinchou, so I swap back into Grovyle, but unfortunately we can't attack before getting knocked out by a Spark. I swap back into Jinx and put it to sleep and then proceed to take it out with just two Confusions. Magneton's out next, but we have Quilava, so I go for Flame Wheel, which does a good amount of damage. He does paralyze us with a Thunder Wave though and then hit with a Shockwave the next turn, but we're able to survive and knock it out with just one more Flame Wheel. Raichu is out next, so I swap into Jinx and hit an Ice Punch, which does a good amount of damage, but we do get affected by the Static and hit with a weak Surf. He does heal up with a Citrus Berry though, and then starts charging a Focus Punch, but thankfully we don't get fully paralysed, and one more Ice Punch brings it down to red health. He does heal up with a Super Potion though, but we're able to take it out with one more Ice Punch thanks to a critical hit, winning us the third badge. We travel through Rock Tunnel, and on the way, Croconaw grows to level 30 and evolves into Feraligatr, which is definitely my favourite fully evolved starter as well. We arrive in Celadon City, and the first thing I do is go to the game corner and get a Porygon, which is actually going to be our next team member. I really do feel like Porygon gets overlooked all the time, so I decide to give it a go. I take on the 4th gym, and while fighting the gym trainers, Quilava actually evolves into Typhlosion. This should definitely come in handy for the next gym. The 4th gym leader is Grass-type user Erika. She starts off with a Victory Bell, so I lead with our brand new Typhlosion. Flame Wheel does a good amount of damage, bringing it down to red health as we get hit with a Sludge Bomb for decent damage. She does heal with a Hyper Potion, but 2 more Flame Wheels are all it takes to get the KO. Next up is Ludicolo, so I swap into Jinx and hit an Ice Beam, which does about half as she sets up a Rain Dance. Because of her ability Swift Swim, she's now faster, but her Surf doesn't do too much and we take it out with one more Ice Beam. Next up is Jumpluff, but we're actually faster, and one 4x super effective Ice Beam is obviously enough to KO. Next up is Vileplume, but he too goes down to just one super effective Ice Beam. This gym fight's really been quite easy so far. Bellossom's out next, but you guessed it, it goes down to just one Ice Beam. Erika's final Pokemon is a Blissey for some reason, so I swap back into Typhlosion. I decide to go for Crush Claw, which does a decent amount of damage, but we do get hit with the Thunder Wave. We do some good damage, but she ends up healing up and then knocking us out with a Seismic Toss. So I swap into our new Feraligatr. Damn, look at those cheeks. I go for Rock Slide as it's physical and it does a good amount of damage, and we get the flinch as well. We do get paralysed, but eventually we're able to knock it out with a few more Rock Slides, winning us the 4th badge. We also get the TM for Giga Drain, which I decide to teach to Grovyle, replacing Absorb. Before moving on, we can actually get our last team member, which in this case is Eevee. In previous gift Pokemon videos, I've actually used all 3 of the original evolutions, so I decided this time I would use something a bit different. In this game, Eevee can evolve into Umbreon using a Moonstone, so that's exactly what I do. Umbreon's one of my favourite evolutions, and if you see my Renegade Platinum live streams, you'll know all about Dark Doggo. We now have a team of 6 as well, which is nice. We take on Team Rocket underneath the game corner, and after growing Porygon just 1 level, it actually evolves into Porygon 2. It's just a shame that Porygon Z isn't in this game. We face off against Giovanni, but his team's actually really easy for us to deal with. Most of his Pokemon are either rock or ground, and even the ones that aren't those types are quite easy for us to deal with anyway, so we beat him without any problems whatsoever. We get the Silph Scope and challenge our rival in the Pokemon Tower. He starts with Golbat, so I lead with Jinx, and 1 Ice Beam is enough to KO from full health. Next out is his starter Magmar, so I swap into Feraligatr. He sets up Sunny Day, which weakens water type moves, but thankfully I went for Rock Slide. We get hit with a massive Thunder Punch, but we're able to survive and bring it down to red health with another Rock Slide. We get KO'd by a Brick Break the next turn though, so I swap into Grovyle and finish it off with a Quick Attack. Next out is Celio, so I stay in and hit with a Leaf Blade. It's not quite enough to KO though, and we get hit with a super effective Aurora Beam, but we're able to survive and finish it off with a Giga Drain. Zwigo's final Pokemon is Haunter, so I decide to swap into Umbreon. His Thunderbolts really don't do too much damage though, and 2 bites are all it takes to get us the win. During that battle, Grovyle actually grew to level 36 and evolves into Sceptile, so now we finally have a fully evolved team. He also tries to learn Thunder Punch, which I definitely want, so I replace Quick Attack. We save Mr. Fuji and get the Pokeflute and make our way to Fuchsia City. While there, I take on the Safari Zone and get the HMs for Strength and Surf. I attempt to take on Koga, but this was actually a huge mistake. His first Pokemon Weezing goes down easily enough, but his second Pokemon Crobat absolutely wipes the floor with our entire team. By the time we can take it out, our final Pokemon Typhlosion falls to poison damage. It was obvious that I was going to need more training, so that's exactly what I do, and this time things go a lot better. First up is Weezing, who falls to just 1 Psychic, and next up is that horrible Crobat. I swap into Umbreon and we get confused, but I'm able to confuse it with our own Confuse Ray. I swap into Jinx and thankfully he hits himself in confusion. We get outsped and he lands a super effective Shadow Ball, which we just managed to survive with 3 HP, and hit back with a super effective Ice Beam, which brings it down to red health. He eats a berry to raise his defense and then uses a Hyper Potion as we hit an Ice Beam, which brings it back down to red health. I decide to swap back into Umbreon as we get hit with an Aerial Ace, which doesn't do too much. We get confused once again, but I'm able to hit a Bite, thinking it would definitely be enough, but he hangs on. So I go for Quick Attack, and he survives that as well. I survive a Sludge Bomb though, and I'm able to finally take it out with 1 more Quick Attack. Next up is Venomoth, so I swap into Typhlosion. I hit with a Flame Wheel for a good amount of damage as he hits us with a Psychic, which does a good amount as well. We take it out with 1 more Flame Wheel thanks to a critical hit, and next up is Fortress, which was a really bad idea as 1 more Flame Wheel knocks that out as well. Tentacruel's up next, so I swap into Sceptile. I go for Dig as he misses a Miracle, and it does a good amount of damage, bringing it down to about half. We're hit with a super effective Ice Beam though, but we're able to survive and hit 1 more Dig, but he just survives on what must be 1 HP and knocks us out with 1 more Ice Beam. I swap into Jinx and go for a Psychic as he goes for a Hyper Potion, but that's not really a problem as we're faster, so we're able to take it out in just 2 hits without taking any damage. It's now down to his last Pokemon Electrode, so I swap into Porygon 2. He goes for a Sharpen for some reason as I go for Tri-Attack, which does a decent amount of damage, but not as much as I was hoping. We're hit with a massive Thunder which knocks us out in 1, thanks to a critical hit. I swap into Typhlosion, but he also gets outsped and 1-hit KO'd by a Thunder. Umbreon suffers the exact same fate, so I swap into Jinx. We're outsped, but he misses the Thunder, and we're able to hit an Ice Beam which brings it all the way down to red health. He does use a full restore, but one more Ice Beam brings it down to below half. He does hit the Thunder this time though and finish off Jinx, and it's down to our last Pokemon for Alligator. This is not looking good. He goes for Thunder, but thankfully he misses as we go for Surf, but it's not enough. He goes for Thunder again and actually misses for a second time, meaning that we can hit one more Surf and take out Electrode. That was an insanely lucky win. We head to Saffron City and take back the Silphco building from Team Rocket. On the way we get challenged yet again by Zwigo. His first Pokemon is Crobat, so I start with Porygon 2. We get confused right off the bat, but we're able to hit a Psybeam which does a good amount of damage. Thanks to good confusion luck on both sides, we're able to knock it out with just a couple more Psybeams. Next up is Magmar, so I swap in for Alligator. He sets up a barrier, raising his defense, which means our Rock Slide doesn't do that much damage. He goes for another one, but I go for Surf this time, which brings it down to KO range. I go for another one, but he outspeeds and hits with a critical hit Thunder Punch, which knocks us out from full health. I swap into Sceptile thinking that a Thunder Punch should be enough, but even with a critical hit it's not, and we go down to just one Fire Blast. I swap in Jinx, who ends up being faster, and we finish it off with a Water Pulse. Ampharos is out next, so I stay in and hit an Ice Beam, but it doesn't do as much as I thought, and then we get paralysed with Thunder Wave. Unfortunately we get taken out before we can finish it off, so I send in Typhlosion. Flame Wheel does a good amount of damage and burns it, but we do get paralysed by another Thunder Wave. We're hit with a Thunderbolt, but we survive and finish it off with one more Flame Wheel. Next up is Walrein, so I swap into Porygon 2 and hit with the Shockwave for decent damage. He tries to hit Fissure, but thankfully it misses. I start spamming Tri-Attack as he hits a Surf until eventually we hit a Paralysis. We're able to survive another Surf and hit another Shockwave, which brings it down to red health as he misses a Blizzard, meaning that one more Shockwave is enough to take it out. Zwigo's final Pokemon is Gengar, so I stay in. He actually ends up charging a Focus Punch, but it fails because we hit a Psybeam. I'm assuming because of our normal typing, this is all he ever tries to do, meaning that we can take it out without even taking damage. We beat Zwigo once again and move on to Giovanni, but this fight wasn't too difficult either. He starts with Houndoom, so I stand out for Alligator. He goes for Crunch, which does over half, as our Surf actually does less than half. For some reason he goes for Flamethrower this turn though, which we just survive, which brings us down to Torrent range, meaning our Surf is now enough to KO. Next out is Nidoking, so I swap into Jinx, and one Ice Beam is all it takes to get the KO. Flygon is out next, and he too falls to just one Ice Beam. Jinx really is OP. Rhydon is up next, so I swap back into Feraligatr, and one Surf is easily enough to KO from full health. Giovanni sends out Cloyster next, so I swap into Sceptile and hit a Leaf Blade, which brings it all the way down to red health. He misses the Supersonic though, meaning we can finish it off with one Thunder Punch. Giovanni's last Pokemon is Persian, and a few Brick Breaks from Typhlosion is all it takes to get us the victory. With Giovanni out the way, we face off against the 6th Gym Leader Sabrina. She leads off with a Mr. Mime as I start with Porygon 2 and hit with a Tri-Attack as she sets up a Reflect. We're able to bring it down to red health before she heals up with a Moo Moo Milk, but this isn't actually a problem as we go for one more Tri-Attack and get an insanely lucky critical hit which finishes it off. Next up is Gardevoir, so I swap in Umbreon. She goes for Wish as I confuse it with a Confuse Ray. Gardevoir hits itself in confusion as we land a critical hit Bite which does a lot of damage. Her Wish comes true though and heals back a lot of her HP. This thing must not be able to hit me as we keep hitting bites and we manage to take it out before we even take a single point of damage. Next up is Espeon, so I swap into Jinx and hit an Ice Beam which does a good amount of damage as well. She starts setting up Calm Minds though, so I decide to put it to sleep with a lovely kiss. She does heal, but we're able to bring it down to about half health before she switches out into Gengar. She does try to put us to sleep, but we stay awake because of insomnia and take it out in just 3 Psychics. Espeon comes back out, so I hit it with one more Ice Beam, bringing it down to red health before we're finished off by a Psychic. I swap into Sceptile to finish it off, but of course she uses a full restore, and our Leaf Blades really don't do that much. We're able to bring it back down to red again before we faint to another Psychic. I switch in Umbreon and finish it off with a Bite, and next up is her Jinx. I swap in Typhlosion, but she has Psycho Boost, an incredibly powerful Psychic move which knocks us out from full health, but it does lower her special attack. I swap into Feraligatr and her moves aren't doing that much damage now, and 2 Rock Slides are all it takes to get the KO. Her final Pokemon is Alakazam, so I swap in Umbreon. Her moves are doing a decent amount of damage and we manage to get the Confuse Ray. I start spamming Bite and it's doing a good amount of damage, but we do fall to an Ice Punch before we can finish it off. I swap in Porygon 2, who's able to tank a Psychic no problem and finish Alakazam off with a Tri-Attack. And that's the 6th badge out the way. We surf south from Pallet Town and arrive in Cinnabar Island. I pay a visit to the Pokemon lab and get Omanyte revived. All hail Lord Helix. With that, I challenge Blaine, the 7th gym leader. He starts off with Arcanine, which is normally his strongest Pokemon. His Fire Blast doesn't do too much though, and Surf does about half. He does use Rest to fully heal him, but we go for Surf and get a critical hit, which takes out in one hit. Next up is Typhlosion, so I go into my own and start spamming Rollout. He misses a Blast Burn, which is incredibly powerful in this game, and Rollout takes it out on the 3rd hit. Next up is Solrock, so I decide to stay in as our Rollout's getting really powerful, but it only does about half and we get taken out by an Earthquake. I swap into Sceptile and I'm able to outspeed and finish it off with the Leaf Blade. Ninetales is out next, so I swap into Porygon 2, who traces Flash Fire. He does put us to sleep, but his fire moves don't work on us, so eventually we're able to take it out with a few hits. Next up is Blaziken, but I swap into Jinx, who's able to outspeed and one-hit KO with a Psychic. Next up is Magmar, so I stay in. He does set up a substitute, but our Water Pulse breaks it instantly. We survive a Thunder Punch easily, and one Water Pulse does a good amount of damage, bringing it down below half and confuses him. He doesn't hit himself with confusion though and lands a cross chop, which we just barely survive as we hit back with a Psychic, but he just survives that and eats a berry. He fully heals with a Hyper Potion the next turn and our Psychic's still doing less than half. He hits himself with confusion this turn, which is great as we're able to hit one more Psychic and bring it down to red health again. He does snap out of confusion this turn though and ends us with a Thunder Punch. I swap into Sceptile, who's able to outspeed and finish it off with a Dig, winning us the 7th badge. The 8th and final gym leader is none other than Giovanni. He leads off with a Flygon as I start with Feraligatr. We're outsped and hit with an Earthquake, but it only does about half, and we fire back with an Ice Punch, which does over half and freezes it. Because of this, one more Ice Punch is able to seal the deal. Next up is Cacturne, so I swap into Jinx and fire off an Ice Beam, which is able to knock it out from full health. Next up is Rhydon, so I swap back into Feraligatr and one super effective Surf is all it takes to get the KO. Tyranitar's out next, so I decide to swap into Typhlosion as we have Brick Break, but it doesn't do anywhere near as much as I was expecting and then we faint to a single Rock Slide. I'll be honest, not my smartest move. I swap back into Feraligatr and hit another Surf, which does a good amount of damage. We're nailed by a massive Hyper Beam though, and obviously that's going to be enough to KO. I swap in Sceptile though, and one Leaf Blade is all it takes to finish it off before it can even move. Persian is up next, so I swap into Umbreon and hit with a Confuse Ray and Toxic. All that residual damage, including the Sandstorm, is really starting to add up, so a couple of bites are all we actually need to take it out. Giovanni's final Pokemon is Swampert, so I prove who the best Gen 3 starter is by swapping into Sceptile and ending it with one well-placed Leaf Blade, winning us the 8th and final gym badge. Before we can take on the Pokemon League, we get challenged by Zwigo once again, but he wasn't actually too difficult this time. His first Pokemon is Crobat, so we start with Jinx, who's actually able to outspeed much to my surprise, and one Ice Beam is enough to take it out. Ampharos is out next, so I swap into Porygon 2. We do get paralysed, but we hit a few Psychics before fainting to a couple of Thunders. I swap into Jinx though, and one Ice Beam is enough to take it out from there. Magmar is out next, so I stay in because it's currently raining. We do get hit by a Cross Chop, but we're able to survive and fire back with a Water Pulse, which does a good amount of damage, almost half thanks to the rain. Unfortunately though, we go down to a Fire Blast the next turn, so I swap into Feraligatr instead. His Cross Chop doesn't do too much damage though, and we're able to finish it off with a Surf. Gengar is up next, so I swap into Umbreon and hit with a Confuse Ray. His Thunderbolts really aren't doing too much damage to us, and we're able to knock it out with a few bites without any real problems. Meganium is out next, so I swap into Typhlosion and we're able to take it out with just one Flamethrower thanks to a critical hit. Zwigo's final Pokemon is Walrein, so I swap into Sceptile and hit with a Leaf Blade, which does a good amount of damage. He does hit back with a super effective Blizzard though, which is enough to take us out from full health. I swap in Feraligatr and hit a Rock Slide and we're able to finish it off thanks to another critical hit. We beat Zwigo and move on through Victory Road, training up the team in the process. We've now arrived at the Pokemon League. Here's a quick look at our team. I don't know if we're going to be able to beat the Elite Four at our current level, but I'm really happy with the team that we've managed to build up. I decided to give it a go, but this ended up being a huge mistake. I can't even get past the first member of the Elite Four, Lorelei, let alone the rest of the Elite Four. It was obvious to me that I was going to need some more training, so that's exactly what I went and did. I train up the team a few levels and try again, and this time things go so much better. She starts off with Dugong, so I lead with Feraligatr. I outspeed and hit with a Rock Slide, which does about half as she sets up the Hail. Even with the leftovers recovery, one more Rock Slide is enough to take it out, and next up is Lapras. I stay in and start spamming more Rock Slides. We get a lot of flinches, and I mean a lot. We manage to bring it all the way down to red health before she uses a full restore. We get even more flinches though, meaning that we're actually able to take it out without even getting hit once. Slowbro is out next, so I swap into Sceptile and hit a super effective Leaf Blade, which brings it all the way down to red health. She does retaliate with a Fire Blast, but we're able to survive and finish it off with one more Leaf Blade. Milotic is out next, so I decide to stay in and hit a Leaf Blade, which does a huge amount of damage. Unfortunately though, she lands a Hydro Pump and takes us out. I swap into Jinx though, and one Psychic is enough to finish it off from there. Walrein is out next, so I swap back into Feraligatr and start hitting more Rock Slides. We actually run out of Rock Slide PP, so I have to resort to Crunch as he sets up a substitute. One more Crunch isn't enough to break the substitute, and he actually ends up going for Sheer Cold. What a BS strategy. I swap into Porygon 2 as we get hit with a Surf, and then I'm able to break the substitute with a Shockwave. You guessed it though, she goes for another Sheer Cold and hits 2 in a row. Jinx saves the day though and finishes it off with a Psychic, and her last Pokemon is Wigglytuff. Ice Beam does about half as she tries to put us to sleep with Sing, but obviously it doesn't work because of our ability, so one more Ice Beam is all it takes to get us the victory. Next up is Bruno, who specialises in fighting types. He starts off with Steelix, who isn't a fighting type, so I start with Feraligatr and hit a Surf. Thanks to a critical hit, it's able to take it out from full health. Donphan is out next, so I stay in and hit another Surf, which brings it down to red health before he hits us with an Earthquake. It doesn't do too much, but he does heal with a full restore. One more Surf brings it back down to KO range, but he decides to swap into Poliwrath. Feraligatr really can't touch it, so I decide to swap into Sceptile, but we get put to sleep with Hypnosis. Unfortunately, we go down to a couple of Dynamic Punches before we can even attack. I swap into Jinx and go for a Psychic, which is almost enough to take it out, but he lives on a Sliver and goes for Mind Reader. He doesn't heal up though, so one more Psychic is enough to take it out, and he sends out Donphan next. It's on low health though, so one Water Pulse finishes it off too. Machamp is out next, so I decide to swap in Porygon 2, but we get outsped and KO by one Cross Chop. I swap into Typhlosion and go for Flamethrower, and we actually get a critical hit, which does a lot of damage. For some reason he decides to go for Light Screen, so we just go for a Brick Break to get rid of it. Unfortunately though, it's not enough to KO and we get hit with an Earthquake, but we just survive with 22 HP remaining. I finish it off with a Flamethrower, and next up is Armaldo, so I swap back into Feraligatr and hit a Surf. It does over half as he hits back with an Earthquake, but we're able to survive on red health. One more Surf is all it takes to knock out the Armaldo, and Bruno's final Pokemon is Hitmontop. I stay in, but we get KO by a high jump kick, so I decide to swap in Jinx. We're faster, and one Psychic is all it takes to get the KO, winning us the second match of the Elite Four. The third member of the Elite Four is Agatha. She starts off with a Shedinja, so I start with Umbreon. I feel like this thing's got some sort of Focus Sash or something, so I decide to go for Toxic for the guaranteed KO. We do get hit with a Silver Wind, but it doesn't do that much, and Shedinja goes down to the poison. Next up is Sableye, so I swap into Sceptile and hit a Leaf Blade. It does okay damage, but we get hit with a Toxic. I go for Thunder Punch to make sure she won't heal, but we actually get the paralysis and then she can't move. Even with the Citrus Berry healing some of her health, we're able to knock it out with one more Leaf Blade. Gengar is out next, so I swap into Umbreon as we get hit with a Will-O-Wisp, but our Synchronize ability means that she also gets burned. We land a Confuse Ray, but she doesn't once hit herself and knocks us out with a few Thunderbolts. I swap in Jinx, who's able to outspeed, and finish it off with a single Psychic. Crobat is out next, so I decide to stay in, but we get hit with a huge Shadow Ball, which does a lot of damage. We hit back with an Ice Beam though, and it's enough to take it out from full health. Next up is Mischievous, so I decide to stay in and hit an Ice Beam, which does over half, but she only decides to go for Taunt, so one more Ice Beam finishes it off with no problems. Agatha's final Pokemon is Hypno, so I stay in and hit an Ice Beam, which does okay damage as she sets up a Calm Mind. We bring it all the way down to red health before she takes us out with a Psychic, so I swap in Porygon 2. To the surprise of no one, she uses a full restore, and our Tri-Attack really doesn't do that much damage. We're able to bring it down below half before fainting to another psychic, so I swap into Feraligatr. We actually get a lucky critical hit Rock Slide, which is enough to knock out Hypno from there. We beat Agatha and move on to the final member of the Elite Four, Lance. His first Pokemon is a Salamence, so this gives you an idea of what this fight is going to be like. Thankfully though we have Jinx and one Ice Beam is enough to KO. Next up is Aerodactyl, and much to my surprise we're actually faster and one Ice Beam is also enough to one hit KO. Next up is Charizard, so I swap into Feraligatr. He does set up a substitute the first turn, but we're able to break it easily with Rock Slide. We're hit with a massive Blast Burn, which does a decent amount of damage considering it's not very effective, and burns us. Despite being burned, Rock Slide still does a good amount of damage. Unfortunately though, he goes for a full restore to fully heal him as we go for a Surf. It does over half, but unfortunately we get taken out the next turn by another Blast Burn. I swap into Porygon 2 and go for Tri-Attack as he goes for Blast Burn but misses. Tri-Attack does a good amount of damage as well, bringing it down to red health. Charizard goes for another Blast Burn but misses again, meaning we can take it out with one more. Next up is a Dragonite, so I stay in. He starts charging a Focus Punch, but our Blizzard hits and brings it all the way down to a sliver of health. He doesn't heal though and goes for Focus Punch again, meaning we can take it out with one more Blizzard no problem. Up next is Gyarados, so I swap into Sceptile and hit with a Thunder Punch, which is 4 times super effective. It does over half, but we get paralysed by a Thunder Wave. Next turn we get hit with a critical hit Earthquake, but we manage to hang on and one more Thunder Punch seals the deal. Lance's final Pokemon is another Dragonite, but this one's a lower level than the other one, so one Ice Beam from Jinx is all it takes to get the knockout. We beat Lance, and all that stands between us and victory now is Zwigo. His first Pokemon is a Heracross, so I start with Jinx. We put it to sleep with a lovely kiss and start spamming Psychic. One brings it all the way down to red health and he stays asleep. He does use a full restore, but one more Psychic brings it back down to red health, so we can just finish it off with a Water Pulse. Next up is Ampharos, so I decide to swap into Umbreon. He starts setting up Tail Glow, which is absolutely terrifying as we confuse it with Confuse Ray. I also get a Toxic on it before he hits us with a massive Thunderbolt, which does a huge amount of damage, but we just survive. I'm able to hit with a weak Bite before we get taken out by one more Thunderbolt. I swap Jinx back in and we go for another Ice Beam and we get a lucky critical hit, which is enough to take out Ampharos. Next up is Magmar, so I swap into Typhlosion. He misses the Fire Blast as we go for Earthquake, which deals a decent amount of damage. We are hit with a couple of Fire Blasts, but we're able to survive and finish off Magmar with just 2 more Earthquakes. Next up is Metagross, so I stay in and hit a Flamethrower, which is boosted by our ability Blaze, but not only that, we get a critical hit as well. That is definitely overkill. Next up is Walrein, so I swap into Feraligatr and hit a Rock Slide. It does good damage as we're hit with an Ice Beam for a small amount. We are hit with a few more Ice Beams, but just 3 Rock Slides are enough to take it out, thanks to another critical hit. Zwigo's final Pokemon is Meganium, so I swap back into Typhlosion and hit another Flamethrower. It's not a critical hit this time and Meganium survives, but goes for Frenzy Plant and misses. Because of this, all it takes is one more Flamethrower to win the battle. We beat the champion, and beat Pokemon FIRE RED OMEGA using only gift Pokemon. Thank you all so much for watching. I had a great time completing this challenge. I would definitely recommend you try this ROM hack out if you're bored of the regular FIRE RED. In my opinion, it is so much better. The game was difficult, but not in an unfair way, and I was able to get an interesting and varied team, even though I was only using gift Pokemon. I would definitely recommend that you try this challenge out yourself. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and subscribe for more content just like this. Also, please make sure to follow me on Twitter and check out the Discord, both links will be in the description. If you have any suggestions on what challenge I should take on next, then please let me know in the comments below. Join me next time where I'll be taking on another ROM hack, this time something a lot more difficult. That's right, I'm going to be doing a video on Emerald Kaizo, so wish me luck. That's all for today, so thank you all so much for watching. Until next time.